Hello members, welcome to the Economies and Neighbourhoods Scrutiny panel. If I could get a bit of members, we are starting now, so thank you very much for being here for the Economies and Neighbourhoods Scrutiny panel. Okay, so we'll just go around and introduce ourselves. So my name's Harpreet, I'm the chair of the Economies and Neighbourhoods Scrutiny panel.
Sheila Dykes, the Governance Officer.
Councillor Richard Eastwood from Lily Ward.
Councillor John Taylor from Button.
Scrutiny Co-operative.
Neighbourhood Co-operative.
Councillor Bruce McBride, cabinet member responsible for a region.
Program Language Special Operations Manager, please.
Thank you very much all. I think we might be having a few problems with the mic. Seems like mine's the only one that's working currently. So if you could just... Okay, I think what we're going to do is, I'm keen that obviously everyone is heard, and it wouldn't be great if all you're hearing is my voice. So what we're going to do is we're just going to pause for a couple of minutes, speak to our engineers and try and get the sound sorted if that's okay. Okay, we have worked out the technological problems, so apologies for that, members. You've all introduced yourselves already, so thank you very much for that. We have got some apologies to note. We've got Councillor Richard Murgatroyd, Councillor Yusra Hussain and Councillor Martin Bolt who can't be here today and have provided their apologies. Okay, I'm going to just move on to interests first. Does anyone have any interests to declare? John.
Yeah, I just want to declare an interest in item 6, tenant involvement engagement, as I'm a member of the board of K&H. Thank you.
Thank you, John. That is noted. Does anyone else have any interest to declare? Okay, you do have a form, so if anything else does come up, please fill in your form, and John's already done it, which is brilliant. Thank you very much. Minutes of the previous meeting. Does anyone want to raise anything about the minutes of the previous meeting? Can we agree those minutes, members? Yes? Great stuff. Thank you for that. This meeting is open to the public. We don't have any members of the public here today. Thank you. Deputations and petitions. We haven't received any deputations or petitions either, have we, Sheila? So thank you very much. So we're going to move straight into the programme. We're going to start with tenant involvement and engagement. So we have Michelle here from Kirklees Neighbourhood Housing. So did you want to kick us off, Michelle? Is that okay?
Thank you. As I said at the start, I'm Michelle Anderson-Daw. I'm Head of Partnerships at Kirklees Neighbourhood Housing, and tenant involvement forms part of my portfolio. I'm just going to update you on the implementation of the new model at K&H, which is delivered on behalf of the Council. Just a brief summary. I appreciate you've got the report in front of you. The Kirklees Federation of Tenants and Residents Association, known operationally as Communities Who Can, was decommissioned by the Council, effective from the 1st of October 2017. Recommendations for a new model was agreed in anticipation of that decision taking effect by the Council and K&H in September that year. The main focus of the new model, which were supported by the Council and K&H, was that any new arrangements needed to have a wider menu of opportunities to hear the tenant's voice, we needed to strengthen links with our governance arrangements, and the report talks about the new tenant and leaseholder panel and the service improvement and challenge panel, which is the scrutiny, the tenant scrutiny. The new arrangement had to have you take advantage of technology, so a greater use of technology, but at the same time hold on to what was working and what was good about the previous arrangements. And again, the report talks about the continuation of forums, neighbourhood forums, estate inspections and surgeries that are delivered with ward councillors. The new arrangements recognises and took advantage of good practice. So we worked on the new model with TPAS, which is the national advisory body and experts in tenant involvement. The consumer standards, which is the regulatory standards that applies to landlords and increasingly to councils that manage council stock. And we also visited a number of other landlords, which is reflected in the report. The new tenant involvement model has a greater focus on tenants doing more for themselves and their communities. It makes better use of the resources that we have for tenant involvement. And again, in 2018-19, we saved, as part of our medium-term financial plan, £50,000 against the new model, without compromising on the ability for tenants to get involved and to do things on behalf of their own communities. The new model is more outcome-focused and aligned with strategic priorities of the Council and of K&H. So all activities delivered by our tenants and resident associations are aligned with the 7 strategic partnership outcomes. The new strategy, Get Involved, was launched in June last year. The approach is aligned with some work that we're doing around fire safety. So we have a resident engagement framework that sits within our fire safety management plan that has been signed off by K&H and is awaiting formal approval by the Hackett Review Board that sits within the council. The new model is going to be evaluated. We're working now on external evaluation, working with TPAS, and that will start in January. And we expect to have the outcome of that by early in the new financial year. And that will tell us what's working and what further improvements or developments are still needed to make sure that we're maximising opportunities to hear our tenants. And so the report, just to summarise, describes our journey to date on tenant involvement going forward in Kirklees. I'm open to questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Michelle. Appreciate that, and you've done it you've been very quick, so I like that. Thank you. Okay, so going to members, and I've got John so far. Thank you.
So I've gone straight through. Yeah. Right. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for this, and thank you for bringing this report. I do have a couple of questions and comments, really. One was a little nervousness from me when I'm looking at 2.4 and we talk about street voices. So this is almost like an individual who's been given a voice and allowed to speak on behalf of their community. And my nervousness is, as a ward councillor, I've been involved in difficult situations where there has been a loud voice in a community that has a very strong view, which might not necessarily be shared by their neighbours and other people within the community. And my nervousness is just that we need to be mindful of that. We don't allow one person's strong opinion to perhaps, and I've had cases where other people have felt uncomfortable challenging that person. So we just need to be careful that street voices don't become the person who shouts loudest gets what they want, in a sense, if you know where I'm coming from. My other comment, really, and it's a question to take away and reflect on, really, is Kirklees Council has embraced place standards as an approach for engagement, and I just want to make sure I'm comfortable that these are aligned. And what I don't really want is ending up in a situation where, for whatever reason, we decide to do some place standard engagement in a community, and that cuts across the K&H properties in that community, because they're undergoing some consultation anyway at a different stage or in a different way. So we just need to be mindful about how we make sure that there's good alignment and it's working smoothly, so the tenants don't feel like they're being continually asked for their opinion, because that'll just get frustrating. And then the other two were really questions, really. The point about the fire safety management plan awaiting formal approval by the council, I'm just wondering, have we been waiting for a period of time? Is there a reason why that hasn't been approved yet? Because I would have thought this certainly will, I know from K&H and discussion about it, it's top of the risk register, top of attention by the senior management, but surely we should be getting a quick response by the council. So just comment on how long we've been waiting and if there is a reason why that is. And then the other one was concerning the I'll get my words right, TLP, Tenants Leaseholder Panel. It's been operating for 15 months. We've only got 6 people appointed to it out of 12. So have we had a problem? Because that doesn't feel like a great performance if we've only managed to recruit half of the panel and we've been running for over a year. It does kind of suggest something's not quite working well or something. So just to comment on that. But thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll just take the street voices first. Street voices aren't individuals who act on behalf of others. That's the Tenant and Resident Association. Street voices are individuals who may be doing work in their community already, may want to continue to do so, but need some support or backing and want to do it in a more formal way. We've developed an agreement, so to be a street voice, there are certain conditions and criteria covering some of the very points that you mentioned. Street voices can now also access funding, so that's even more important that they are working in a way that complies with good governance and also good accountability for the funding that they require or that they're requesting. And we're doing a lot of work around training and supporting and upskilling individuals. It's worth saying that we now have 47 tenants and residents associations who are active and thriving. But we are seeing an increasingly number of individuals who committed and want to do something, but for whatever reason, either isn't a TRA, a tenant and resident association in their area, or they themselves have been doing things for a number of years and are quite used to working informally with others, but not as part of a formal constituted group, which the TRAs want to be. So we didn't want to throw it out because there is an increasing number of individuals who want to do that, but we wanted it to form part of the new model and not sit outside, again, taking into account some of the points that you raise. So that's the very reason. And they are supported by the tenant involvement team at K&H. They are worked with, they have to report in, they have to comment on what they're doing, so that we can, for want of a better word, regulate the activity as well as provide support. Place standards, a really good point. All the tenant involvement team and a number of other officers, I think we've got in excess of 20, have been trained on the place standard. I sit on the internal councils group, which monitors all place standards activities across Kirklees. Any activity, tenant engagement, involvement, consultation, goes through that route in order that we don't duplicate, we don't get consultation fatigue, and that it's fully aligned. What we've agreed informally is where there is consultation in areas that there's a large number of K&H properties, K&H will lead on that, but under the auspices of the place standard framework. So that's, in some ways, we get 2 for 1. And an example of that is Your Home, Your Place, which is our investment programme. Where we've done consultation, we've taken into account wider needs of that area, as well as what we want specifically in terms of identifying investment priorities, and worked with partners across the council to share that information. So if it's about green space, if it's about other aspects of the council, highways, etc., that we're doing it on behalf of the council as well as what K&H wants. So I hope that gives you some reassurance. The Hackett Review Board, yes, the chair of the review board is also the chief operating officer for K&H. It's been formally approved. When I say it hasn't been signed off, in that if there's any issues or queries or anything we need to strengthen. Because of Joanne's link, it has gone to the Hackett Review Board. What we're waiting is in formal sign-off, as in the minutes and the notes. The work in the fire safety management plan is ongoing. And a lot of the early work is around compliance, as you'll know. So that hasn't stopped, and the work with residents hasn't stopped. We've got a comms plan, we're working with the tenant leaseholder panel, trying to look at some of the language that we're using. Is it fit for purpose? Does it enable and encourage tenants to get involved? So we're starting that work. We've not stopped, even though we're waiting formal sign-off. And finally, the tenant leaseholder panel. It is fair to say that we've done 2 rounds of recruitment. We've done the recruitment with TPAS to try and look at different ways of recruiting. It is a more robust process. We have had more people wanting to be on the panel generally, but the robustness is about what they're bringing. So it's a recruitment process. It's quite informal. It includes members of the K&H board, but it's strengthening the fact that it's what are they bringing, what are they learning. So that has meant that it's been not just about anyone coming on, it's the right fit for what the organisation and the tenants need. So we're still working with TPAS, and TPAS is supportive of that. So they're very much engaged. It's an ongoing process, but what we've got, and you will see that as a member of the board, is a strong, a very vocal, a very committed group. They've set up their own WhatsApp, they meet in between their own meetings, They've had their first board and TLP meeting. They'll be coming to every board meeting now. So I'm confident we've got the right people. However, that means that it's going to take longer to fill the quorum that we can.
Rob, was it specific to this point?
Yeah, just information really, as a former chair of this group, just to point out that there was a single item meeting of this committee to look at the Hackett review and specifically to respond to the social housing green paper consultation process. So we had the meeting where officers from K&H and from our own council housing team came along to present evidence, to talk through these issues. We then made certain recommendations which fed into the consultation that went back to central government. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Andrew.
Right. Firstly, thank you. Congratulations on all the all the acronyms and actually explaining them very well, actually. But I think certainly for new readers, a diagram of how the governance works might be quite interesting with the new vocabulary, because there's two vocabularies in here. There's the old one and the new one, and it's quite hard work keeping up to what's going on. A specific question, in 2.6 you talk about some outcomes and you're tracking those quarterly. How are you doing? How is it going?
In terms of, we've got a suite of PIs that are shared at the board quarterly, and they're also shared with the council through our quarterly business assurance report. In terms of the STAR survey that the K&H listens and acts upon the views, we're seeing a steady increase in that. But that will be monitored robustly, because what we're trying to do is not just look at the high level PIs, but understand what that means, because we know tenants might feel that we're listening in one area of the business and not in the other. So we want to adopt a bit more of an intelligence-led approach. But on the face of it, we're doing very well in that. The percentage of active tenants and residents association and street voices was specifically put as a percentage because when we started, and as the report highlights, we had a lot more tenants on the books, but actually in terms of robust and actually being active and proactive, there were far fewer. So what we're doing is still doing a lot of work with them, but actually we want to monitor the percentage that are robust. And by that, it's about being constituted, their involvement in drawing down the grant. It's about them having an AGM. It's about submitting regular accounts. It's the number and type of activities. So there's a checklist for what we consider to be an active TRA. It's not just about having your name in a paper. It's not just about being on the digital platform, which is the tenant involvement. It's really about them meeting all that requirement. Underrepresented groups, we're doing really well in terms of young people. But that's because we, as part of the wider menu, we recognise that our tenant involvement team or our other officers are not always best placed to be the face of engagement with different groups. So what we've started to do is establish a number of informal and formal small commissions, relationships with organisations that already work with young people and have a captured group. So we worked with two groups this year, one working with under 17-year-olds and one working with up to 18-year-olds to inform some of our consultation. So we set out what we want and left it to those groups to devise it and design it in a way that worked with the audience, and that proved successful in increasing the numbers of young people that we engage with. Where we still have more work to do is with BME groups and people with disabilities. Some of that is about knowing and understanding where they are, because we don't always know that. But having tested the new approach to working with young people, we intend to roll out and identify groups that already have those connections and those specialisms and expertise, and work through those groups in order to achieve our engagement objectives.
Just want to follow up. Do you actually have targets for these indicators, or are you?
Yes, we do have targets.
So are you meeting those, or are you?
Yes, in the areas that we've said, the one that's still been tested is the number of, because we have targets for individuals involved, but we have the number of households that are involved, and that's about new households coming on. There's still more work to be done. We're getting a number of hits, but they tend to be from some of the same households or people in the same households. So it's fair to say we've set ourselves some really robust PIs, but we have measured ourselves against other local landlords, other ALMOs, and we are parallel to them. It's not easy, but it's something that we think is more stretching and making sure it's more meaningful, and we're not continually counting the same numbers. So definitely more work to do.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. Michelle, just wondering, are you able to share that information?
I can send you up to the end of Q2 PIs. Yeah, who would I send them to?
You can send them to me and Sheila.
I will do. Thank you.
Right, I've got Richard and then I've got Alida. Is that okay? So Richard.
Okay, hi Michelle. Yeah, I'm just looking at page 19 on the various boxes that there are. In the first one, it's mentioning tenant involvement at K&H means we, and then I won't list them all, but there's listen, engage and feedback. Now, this could well be an area for some improvement, given a recent instance in our ward, where the initial engagement was fine. Residents and leaseholders received a letter notifying them of repairs required for their properties. Some of the leaseholders were limited to the amount of money that they would be liable to, others weren't. They queried what was actually going to be happening, didn't get a reply. Followed that up, didn't get a reply. And 6 weeks after the initial feedback to the officers, they still hadn't received anything back, which is why they got us as local councillors involved. We then found out that the letters didn't apply to this particular property, and all it was repointing of the building, and I think there are 6 flats in this particular block. Now, one resident was so concerned she had an individual assessment done. If the property had needed the work doing, it could have cost thousands of pounds. At the end of the piece, they were told, well, it was a generic letter, it was sent out in error. So the sleepless nights that one lady had, she's in her 70s, dare I say 80s. She wasn't happy. She doesn't use the internet. She called as well as wrote, but there was no response given. One of her neighbours does actually work for the council, so she stepped in, sent a few emails. The emails, no answer. It only took engagement with us local councillors that they actually finally got this answer. So the question really is, what checks are being made before letters go out of this generic nature on, repairs? Because some of these residents are open to a unlimited cost, really.
Thank you. The incident you're talking about. I'm assuming you're linking it to Your Place, Your Home, the investment programme, and the letters that will be sent out through property services. I'm happy to get the details and to look into that. How it works, we've got colleagues in...
As a separate... actually, on that platform, in fact, I was also curious to see how it's advertised and how people know about it. So, for example, could it or is it on the Kirklees website that when people log in to access services, is it promoted there, as an example? And as a separate point, I think you've touched on this, you said we did, but I was keen to hear a little bit more about how the different platforms for engaging with people who might not be keen to use the online platform.
Thank you very much. The platform was launched last October. It's fair to say that it's been a slow burner. It is starting to generate more traction, but that's primarily because we're directing more traffic to it. So, for example, the grant schemes now, grant applications have to be completed online. The way the platform is set up is it's set up in a number of theme areas. So we have an area for tenants and residents associations. We have an area for engaging with board. We have an area where people can have dialogue. They can just ask a question and it can come to my team. And then there are areas of interest. So young people, children, families, older people, people with disabilities, BME groups. So and it varies depending on what the subject is. There's two sides in terms of increasing traction to that we're working on and continue to work on, and it is by no means easy. Internally, the platform will only work as good as how much it's used internally, so what we put on it. So we're doing a lot of internal road shows that we started last year and will continue again. We stopped for 6 months, monitored the traction, and we did see some, and we're doing it again in the new year, which is about getting our staff across property services and neighbourhoods to use it. So if there's say for example, if there's an event going on in your local area and as a housing officer you found out about it, post it on there. See what comes back. So we want it to be kind of interactive rather than always thinking, well, I have to go out, I have to put something in one of our 6 stories or the 12-storey blocks. And also externally. We've done a lot of work with the TRAs, so the officers have literally gone out with the TRAs and sat with them to encourage them to use it. So all the TRAs, as part of their commitment, have to be on the platform. They have to have the name of the chair, they have to have the name of the treasurer. I said all the decisions on grant applications have to be there. If you're awarded a grant, you have to put on there what the grant is for and what activity. Because although it may be the TRA that's applied for the grant, the activity is for the benefit of that area. So what we're trying to do, and again that's been working with TPAS, is trying to look at different ways to drive traffic to the platform. The ways in which it's accessible is there isn't a direct link to the council. We did look at that last year. However, the cost of doing that outweighed at the moment the cost of the budget that we had available. So we said we would give it between 18 months to 2 years. However, K&H itself has a website, its own website now, which is linked to the council. And if you go into K&H website, if you go through the council to K&H, you can get one on the front page is Get Involved. So you can access it through that way. There's also cards. So every event we go to, not just tenant involvement events, operatives have them, all staff housing officers have Get Involved cards. So people can indicate how they want to get involved if they want to get involved. We have neighbourhood forums, we have surgeries, work with local members, we still do estate inspections, we still have the TRAs. So we still have a range of different ways of getting involved. We still do activities like in our retirement living schemes. So because we know that they may not want to be get onto the platform, but still want to have a voice. So we're looking at a menu of different ways, and increasingly, as I've said, we're working through other organisations who have a better relationship or more experience with particularly some of our marginalised groups. So the platform is only one of a number of different ways, and most certainly is not the only way to engage with us. And you said something else about other... Yes, the outcomes I'll send you as part of the PIs, because that will tell you how we're doing. Is that okay?
Thank you. Chris.
Well, thank you, Michelle. I found your report gave me a great insight into what's going on with tenants that I certainly didn't have before, so thank you for that. I'm also very impressed with your in-depth knowledge. You've been able to answer just about every question that's been thrown at you there. One thing that particularly interested me was in 2.3.1 about the integrated grant scheme, where you say one TRA has received funding to run a youth diversionary activities aimed at addressing antisocial behaviour, which is absolutely excellent, I think. 2 questions. Have you got an example of what they're actually doing? And secondly, is that being pushed out for a wider application? Because that's certainly something that is very important in current climate.
Thank you. So just for clarity, are you talking about this specific activity or generally?
On this specific one, where it talks about the diversionary activities.
Yeah. As I said at the beginning, all the activities now that TRAs can apply to deliver have to align with the 7 Kirklees outcomes, very loosely. So if it's the young people, is it around improving health and well-being, etc. That allows us also to see what impact that's having on wider priorities for K&H and the council. In relation to this specific activity, this is one of our more long-standing and really quite independent TRAs who has accessed lottery funding and a range of other funding. As a TRA, there are 2 elements. There's a TRA grant, which is your running costs, and then there's more funding, up to 2,000 per award, because we release rounds of funding depending on how quickly the first round gets spent, etc. We haven't limited ourselves on that, but you can get up to 2,000. You have to have spent it. You have to have delivered what you said you were going to. And so what they've done, and what we've tried to encourage more TRAs to do, but this one in particular is really good at it, is using the grant that they get from us as match funding for other larger funds. What that also does, it gives them more flexibility in terms of what they want to do. Can definitely send you some information about the diversionary activities specifically, but this was specific to this area because the tenants in that area identified lack of activities for young people as a specific issue that they wanted to and continue to prioritise. So that's work for that. Some other areas, a lot of activities around isolation. Increasingly, we're having a lot more around skills and learning as well, and trying to do more for local people to increase confidence, reduce isolation.
Any more questions, members? No? Thank you, Michelle. That was very detailed, and you're obviously on top of your brief there as well, so appreciate that. So this is going to be quite an important subject going forward, particularly with what happened at Grenfell. It's really important that we listen to our tenants when they're raising concerns, and perhaps that hasn't happened as well as it should have done in the past, and it's good to see movement here, but I'm sure this is something we'd like to come back to as well. So thank you very much, Michelle. You've offered to provide extra information, which is brilliant. And we'll get in touch with you about that as well. So is that okay?
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Right then, members, we're going to move on to playable spaces. So I'm going to ask colleagues to move to the front over here. We've got Catherine and Rob from the Green Space team. And they're going to give a presentation, a short presentation, and then I'm sure we're going to have quite a few questions from members. And so we've got Councillor Rob Walker here as well, and Councillor Peter McBride to answer questions also. Okay, Rob, are you going to kick off the presentation?
That's okay.
Brilliant, thank you.
Right, thank you, Chair. My name is Rob Delby. I'm the Green Space Operations Manager. So I don't intend to rehash the Playable Spaces strategy. I think it's been talked around quite a bit. Please feel free to ask questions about it if you wish to afterwards. But this is really just to give a bit of an update where we are with it post the relaunch, for want of a better phrase. So it was the revised Playable Spaces strategy was approved in Cabinet on the 8th of October. Just for clarity, that wasn't a U-turn or anything else. It was just making it, providing clarification around the strategy itself. So it was always around public engagement. It was always around providing communities what they would wish, and this was just to provide a bit further clarity around it. We had a timeline. Sadly, that timeline has been slightly interrupted. There's I believe, an election in December. So because of the pre-election period, that has been slightly put back. But the concept remains pretty much untouched. So we will be meeting with ward members on a ward-by-ward basis to discuss their individual concerns and to build up a better understanding around that kind of the geography of the area, so kind of the social geography of the area and around the individual play sites. Following that, we will then have a broader engagement strategy, which will focus hopefully on a lot of the stakeholders, so principally the children, but also people who use those sites, who have an interest in those sites. And that general engagement through things like community hubs, through play workers and so on, will help inform how the process moves forward. Post May the 5th, the elections? Maybe whenever. Sometime, it's less important to me than some people in the room. Post that point in May, then obviously wider engagement will then take place. At that point, we will start to hold far more targeted engagements around the playable spaces, so that we can then start to develop play designs. So to drill down slightly into what the ward briefings will cover, it really is about trying to understand that local intelligence around the use of sites, about what you think the purpose of that site could be potentially going forward, other areas that could benefit from play work, and also considering about the wider areas. So what would you perceive are the barriers to people coming into parks, into green spaces? What are the barriers to people accessing play areas? And all of that kind of narrative, because members have a far better idea of local intelligence than officers do. We don't work in those areas per se. You're very much integrated within those communities. And then a lot of that intelligence as well will then be fed through into other work streams, working closely with communities, working closely with public health, and so on. So there is the obesity agenda, for want of a better term. There's a physical activity agenda. There's about community cohesion and working with people. And all of those things aren't in isolation. Green space provides the spaces, we provide the stage, but other people provide the narrative, provide the play that plays out on those stages. So the reason we work with them is that they can then help inform our decisions, we can help support their activities going forward. This is a bit more about the public engagement. And for us, it's really important to listen to the children's voices. I'm not suggesting this for a second would be a general thing, but sometimes potentially children will be very keen to provide people with the answers they think they want to hear, or will provide answers that they are potentially retransmitting from people grown-ups who possibly have opinions around things. Whereas we are really keen to hear that very authentic voice of the children. So we're working with play workers, working with professionals in this particular field to really understand what does play look like. Because I wasn't going to do this, but I will do. The whole point of this strategy is to provide as diverse a play opportunity to people who want to play as possible, and to make sure that people can fully appreciate that play happens where you play. It isn't about a constrained space, and it isn't about a defined activity. Play is there to aid development, physical and mental, and it's how do we best enable that throughout the entire district. And the more we can hear from those authentic experiences, authentic voices, I think the better we can provide this. We're going to link with people like the primary care network, with GPs, with the head teachers, and so on. So again, we kind of hear that very authentic voice. And again, just for clarity, which I think has been occasionally lost in some of the static, this isn't about taking away swings and roundabouts. This isn't about inflicting a totalitarian regime of rocks and logs in terms of play, and you won't have any other play. It's about giving as much play choice as possible and giving us a diverse opportunity for play as possible. So I will mannerize. This is in a ward not too far from here. And this was a developed scheme that was developed in conjunction with a local community and with the local ward councillors. And it wasn't specifically to showcase this, but it was taking some elements of the philosophy of this. But for great clarity, this is not a behind-the-scenes rollout of it. This really was a discussion about how can we best maximise play. You can see from the before and after. The before has maybe some biodiversity interest in that there's quite a nice little bit of grass there, might be some insects there and so on. The after does not necessarily conform to traditional play, what you would expect from a play area per se. There are still swings, there's still a slide, you can't quite see it, but kind of up on as you're looking at it, on that side, the right-hand side, there's a cargo net, scramble net type thing. But the general layout of this is around a river cascading through the landscape that's made up of various obstacles, various things you can play on. So there's rocks, stepping stones, there's big rocks, small rocks, there's a bridge that you can scramble underneath and be a troll, or there's a bridge you can go over the top of and be whatever people is who go across on top of bridges. Yeah, there we go then. It is a really exciting space. It hasn't officially opened yet. We've just about finished the planting. But it is, I mean, I've been on it and I was accused by my team of being a big kid as I then played for half an hour on it. But it has been developed in conjunction with the community and with the local ward members. So I think the reason I put up there is to show that this isn't just about, you know, rocks and logs. It's about how those rocks and logs are embedded in the landscape and how they release the imagination for people. And it isn't an either-or situation. This is a as-well-as situation. So it's giving traditional play equipment, opportunities for people to sit, opportunities for people to interact socially. What you can't see from the pictures on the bottom end of it, there's some mounds and some posts, and there are places for people just to sit quietly and socialise. To be able to have that full dynamic and that full range of people, how they can access this space. And I think part for me, it's how people will make up their own narrative. They'll make up their own story about what this space is for. And it really is about creating those stages to allow people to make up their own stories. So yeah, thank you. Any questions?
Okay, members, yes. John.
Thanks, Rob. I mean, I welcome this and I'm, you know, supportive of what you're attempting to achieve. The one thing I would ask you to think about, you mentioned children and the voice of children. I think you're absolutely right there, because we were talking in the earlier session about loud voices, and there are sometimes loud voices that aren't necessarily children that get involved. But I think about people with learning difficulty, and I think perhaps you need to take them as a separate group to look at. You know what I mean? Children and older children, because sometimes, you know, my niece is I should know her age, but she's nearly 30. But she still plays because of her disability. So there are older people who are going to play in that sense. And so it's just making sure that, you know, we have some stuff that's perhaps appropriate for them, because obviously some of this stuff might not work for them. So it's just taking that group separately and just having a think about how we could work with them. But other than that, broadly supportive.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, we're absolutely aware of that, the kind of additional educational needs or special needs, and things like autism, quiet play, all those things are being taken into account. So we are very, very conscious of that it's important that everybody has access to accessible play and accessible to them. So what the very best that they can get out of it and the experiences that they can get from that. So yes, absolutely.
Yeah, actually, I just want to say it's a very good point that John's made, and sometimes what we do is we think about it afterwards, don't we? So we create a place and then it's not always suitable for disabled people and sometimes can be left out of the process. So anything that we can do to involve those groups. And I'm just thinking now about dementia-friendly places as well, and you're obviously having to think about that as well, aren't you? Yeah. Looks like it, yeah. Robbie, I think you wanted to come in on this point, yeah?
Yeah, very good point, John. Thank you for that contribution. Also, youngsters with physical disabilities are a group of people and their parents who we really want to cater for. And we've discussed that quite a bit in our internal discussions. And just over this weekend, I had a chat with two people. One person who runs a group for older disabled people. It's all about getting them out into the countryside, out into the fresh air to take exercise. And another younger disabled people who's just sort of finishing education, really to talk to them about their views on how we put together a representative group so that we are really getting authentic and good feedback to help us shape what we're doing.
Andrew?
Thanks, Rob, for this report. In the preamble from Councillor Walker, there's an amount of money, £9.5 million mentioned. Firstly, sort of a question about that, we wonder how that was arrived at and what period we've got to spend it in. And then to help understand what that's going to do for us, how many manor rises do you get for £9.5 million? So I've got no idea what these things cost. I think they're quite expensive. So just trying to get ourselves calibrated, because I think there's an anxiety, might be anxious that £9.5 million won't actually go that far. and we could all get very excited about it, but really it's only a relatively small number of places that we can actually change.
Okay, so the 9.5 million was arrived. We previously had some play classifications around doorstep, community and destination play spaces. So there was a ballpark estimate based against each of those. We're looking at 177 sites to reach the 15-year cut-off point. And so we multiplied that through, and that's what we arrived at. And the programme was intended to last over 3 years. I think that given the interest that was shown in it, we're potentially looking at reprofiling the programme to 5 years, just so we can make sure that that level of engagement is there, which may also mean we'll have to go back for an additional capital ask. So the capital ask may be somewhere in the region of 1.5–2 million in that order, but it kind of depends in terms of what communities are, how imaginative they are and what they want. Manor Rise was 50,000. To develop that and produce that. But there was an awful lot of work there, and partly because that was effectively building that from scratch. So we would be looking to work with communities, and it may well be that the community itself, or the interested stakeholder groups, are quite ambitious in their views. I'll cite Beaumont Park, for instance. They are very ambitious. They have gone out and they're raising their own funds for it. So part of what would happen was that the funds that we put in could be helped leverage extra funds. So it could be used as seed funding, it could be used to leverage extra funds coming in. We could look at designs that could be phased over time, that could be done over that, and so on. So yes, I think Manor Rise is a particularly nice site, but it isn't necessarily, you wouldn't necessarily get all of that for your money, or you might get it over time, or you might choose to develop it yourself. So does that answer your question?
My interpretation of that is, well, I heard you say 177 sites, so it sounds like there's about £50,000 a site if I was to sort of just do the quick arithmetic on 9.5 million, about that number. Because 200 times 50,000 is 10 million, isn't it? Yeah. Is that about right? Just so we understand, so we understand what we're dealing with. Yeah? Okay, thanks. It's all right. Poised there, it's all right. So in quick and dirty maths, you're right, but for some sites we'll take more money, some sites will take much less money. So I don't think it would be right to say there would be a budget of 50 grand per site. Some sites will have a lot more spent on them, some sites will have less spent on them. The equivalency works out across the piece. And as we mentioned, so we are very conscious of people with additional needs, and we're really keen for this to be a genuine through age. So as you say, dementia friendly. It's about grandparents and grandchildren. It isn't just about traditional swings and roundabouts. So it really is taking each site on its own merits, considering how we can best work with the community to develop that. And as a service, whilst it would probably make the budget holders wince slightly, I would be very keen that what we don't want to do is bulk at an extra few pounds where we could develop something far better for that. So I think, yes, it is a fixed budget, but I would also think that we as a service would potentially be going back for more if it needed it.
Hi, I want to ask about a couple of things. One of them is about how you identify sites, or what the definitions of playable spaces are. And I think you've talked about this, how they're not just this swings and slides, etc. But I just wonder how wide the remit is on that, on essentially what is a playable space. And the other part was about, or the other question is about the maintenance budget. And the reason why I'm asking particularly around both of these is that I think, as an example, I think it's the cycle path that goes out to Bradley and Murfield, and there are sort of some quite wide spaces that have, for example, goalposts and stuff. I don't think people really use those, and I think lots of it, the grass tends to be long, it tends to be full of dog dirt, and lots of broken glass everywhere. I think I walked that way this morning. Whereas in here, for example, it mentions in the findings that kids, for example, I think preferred just having a few trees. So this area could easily, like, other than the goalpost, there's generally nothing, but it would be a good place for building dens, etc. Many of these things you've identified, and I'm not sure does that count as a playable space, but I think on the whole, it's really important to see that there's a maintenance budget for it, and not just to replace the equipment, but also to make sure there are bins, to make sure the bins are emptied, to make sure the glass and whatever is cleaned up, to make sure the grass is cut, and I think that's a really vital element to maintaining this.
I completely agree. So in terms of definition of playable spaces, we have, I think the figure keeps fluctuating slightly, but around about 340 play areas. So initially, those are what are considered to be playable spaces, what are actually defined as play areas. We're looking to broaden that in that we're very keen that we have playable routes as well. So it's linkages between spaces. You mentioned the cycle path. There are sort of cycle paths off trafficked routes that can then enable children to go to school, move to destination spaces or whatever. So they would be kind of gathered into this and would then form part of the play network, for want of a better term. In terms of a maintenance budget, we are responsible for the maintenance of green spaces presently, so we maintain those. Things like the Bradley cycle path are slightly anomalous because they were created through capital money, but there was never then a service set aside to actually manage them. So as this programme goes forward, we would identify those spaces, we would take responsibility for them, and we would manage them going forward. So the intention is that you end up with something that is maintained, that isn't full of dog dirt, or as far as you can possibly manage that. There's some education that goes around that, persuading people not to allow their dogs to do their business there, or if they have to do that, clean it up after themselves. But equally, it's about managing those spaces, and also seeing, would people be prepared to take some control of it themselves as well. So,
Richard, did you want to come in? Yeah.
Yeah, just regarding the on page 23 where it's saying about phase 1 over the winter of 2019-20 and gathering views and opinions from children across the district. Is that going to be aimed specifically at schools, or what wider sort of groupings such as scouts, brownies, guides, that sort of thing?
So that's still slightly in development. We're looking to work with community hubs, schools community hubs, so that captures an awful lot of that voice. And potentially, yes, the sort of the uniformed service type things, so scouts, cubs, brownies, guides, rainbows, beavers. I forget what the rest of them are called. So yeah, all as many voices as we can possibly hear. The intention is that the 9.5 million, again, some of that is set aside for the community engagement. It isn't just about the physical infrastructure. For me, it's as important to have those discussions and to fully understand how that stuff is developed.
Sorry, Rob, one afterthought. It's probably worth reaching out to Vena's team and the governance team, Place Standard, and just all the place standards that have been done is get them to do a trawl through for you of anything that's in there, particularly around the children's voices, so probably worthwhile adding that in as well.
We've done it. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor McBride.
Can I make a comment? With this item and the previous one, what strikes me is that at the corporate level, everything is thoroughly well planned and so on. The critical issue is to deliver on the ground with councillors at the centre of things, and councillors in turn making themselves the centre of community. So this can be translated most effectively into a policy by the involvement of councillors. That puts an onus on them it requires more work of them to work more effectively with communities and so on. I think the kind of work we do in our ward, and I know you do in your ward, Chair, I'm trying to pull all this together. If you don't, it won't work. And I think there was a point made by the peer group review. We have all sorts of good policies and intentions with regard to place-based working, but often on the ground it falters. And it falters for this reason, because this is where the important pickup is.
Is it on this point, Rob? Because Chris wants to come in as well. Shall we let Chris and then come to you? Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, just a couple of questions. I'm glad to see that you're including old folks in the people you're talking to, because we never have enough seats when we take the grandchildren to the play areas. Are you only covering council-owned play areas? Right. Are the independent ones subject to any regulation by council? That's a question. I don't know if you can answer that or not. The other thing that interests me is the play area guardians. That sounds a great idea. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
In terms of regulation, they will be covered by normal health and safety regulation. So there's an expectation that they're safe, that they are kept in good order, and that they are inspected. We don't manage that, as in my service. I would suspect it's the HSE who would get involved if something happened. But I will get back to you on that because I don't know the answer. Play area guardians. It kind of feeds on from the whole concept around volunteering. So it's people who wish to become involved, wish to become engaged, and wish to promote play as well. So it's people who are passionate about their area, who care about it. It may involve the TRAs. It can involve all sorts of people like that. Yeah, it's not a difficult thing to get your head around, really. It's people who want to make the world a better place.
Have you started to advertise that?
Not yet, no. So.
Yeah. I think Councillor Taylor earlier made an excellent point about the importance of linking this work with the work that we're doing on the place standard. Like Councillor Taylor, within my own ward, one of the villages, Linthwaite, were one of the early adopters of the place standard. And at a follow-up meeting, looking at how the findings from that can be followed up to deliver improvements in the community, it was suggested that we need a meeting where we're looking at the totality of the playgrounds in the area, because it's a village with very poor provision in terms of there are no public buildings, there's nothing like doctors or anything like that, but there are loads of parks. And I think the view is that we should look at those together to look at how they can work together in terms of the best possible provision for youngsters in the area.
Any more questions, members? No? Thank you for that. I did just want to go back to what Eliza said about the maintenance budget. That's going to be quite key, isn't it, going forward? And you mentioned some of the green spaces. So we've got quite a big green space. So I'm in Fartown, so we have that Bradley Fartown route going through ours. And what you've mentioned about the dog poo and broken glass and cutting the grass down, because those routes are great routes for people to get off the main highway, not have to be taking in fumes and the rest of it. But some people don't like using them because they don't feel as safe as they could, and they don't perhaps look as nice as they could. And potentially we could be building these great spaces, but the maintenance of it is going to be the key thing, and having it as a safe and trusted place that people can go to is going to be key. So just want to push you again a little bit on that maintenance aspect, which I think is going to be really key.
At the risk of making a bid for my own service area, it comes down to revenue budgets. There's been, I think, the thick end of £2 million taken out of my revenue budget over the last few years. If, in order to maintain spaces, you need to have people and machinery to do it. Yeah. We are undertaking a wholesale review of how we deliver green space over the next couple of years, where we will map everything, understand what the purpose of each space is. A lot of this is to do with around with biodiversity, around with linkage, around with physical activity and recreation, and public amenity. So it's important that we deliver the very best we can for those spaces. At the end of that exercise, we should understand the scale of revenue that is required to deliver all of that, and that will include things like playable routes and playable spaces, with an intention that hopefully we will move away from some of the siloed working that previously has kind of, dogged all local authorities, not just Kirklees, in that it won't necessarily sit in a highways budget or a waste budget or a parks budget or a PRP budget. It is a maintenance issue that the council needs to address, and I'm hoping that by the end of all of that, then some of the the anomalies that sit across the piece will be addressed and removed, is my hope.
Thank you. Just going to bring Rob in first and then John.
Yeah, I think the maintenance issue is really important. The other thing that we've perhaps not stressed enough so far in the meeting is that this is not just about the physical environment, creating these spaces. This is, I think, a good example of joint working where community health, the community hubs, public health, the community hubs, and the communities part of the council are all working together to look at how we can encourage children and the parents, other people, out into open spaces to take exercise, to take leisure, to enjoy the outdoors. And I think it is really important that we have an approach where the different services work closely together. Meetings are already taking place where those services are coming together to discuss those things, and hopefully that will make a real difference.
Just welcome what Rob said about doing a review of all the green space. I think one of the problems has been people aren't clear about what some of the green spaces in our wards are there for or are deemed to be. And the point you make about biodiversity is very important, because what people see is just we've stopped cutting the grass because we haven't communicated anything other than that. So if we're not clear about how we want space to be used, and we're not clear about this area, the grass hasn't been cut here because we're trying to, encourage biodiversity, and this is the area where you can walk through safely. We're not getting that communication across to communities. Obviously, it's going to be seen as a negative thing. So I really welcome that work, so we can be a lot clearer with people about what we are doing and why we're doing it. Because at the moment, there is that perception in some areas where we've just stopped maintaining things, rather than we've changed, repurposed that area.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. So absolutely, I think that the intention is that we will have a much more effective communication policy around that. That again, when we clearly define what spaces are for, and looking at things like habitat corridors, biodiversity linkage, and all the rest of it, it's about clearly signposting those, possibly including signs on the ground, as well as kind of social media and all that kind of thing. And then we're also starting a programme around citizen science. So looking at key performance indicators around biodiversity gain that people can become engaged with. So relatively simple presence and absence surveys, potentially looking at some key indicator species surveys, so that as people get a greater understanding of how things are changing as we manage habitats and manage spaces differently, they can start to become apostles for the whole process. So they can say, well, there's butterflies here when there weren't butterflies here before, or there's different flowers coming here when there weren't different flowers before, and so on quite a simple level. So,
just quickly coming back on that, brilliant. And can we engage the schools on that? Because I think children would love doing that, going out with a little net and finding out what is there and what isn't there, and understanding that and see how that fits into the curriculum. And again, one of the great things kids are is they bully the parents to do the right thing.
Yeah, I think it's always good to look at where there is good practice. And I think at the moment, the work that's been undertaken by River Homes Connection is outstanding, really. And they're working with volunteers, they're working with schools, they're working with ward councillors to get children out into the outdoors and engage with their surroundings. And they're not just doing it in the more affluent areas of the Home Valley, the Home Firths and so on. A lot of the work they're doing is down in places like Lockwood and Newsham, where you've got some of our more deprived communities. And they're making a real difference in terms of getting children out, experiencing the countryside, and encouraging them then to go outside school in their spare time. So we could learn a lot, I think, from looking at what's happening there. And I know Rob and his service have been trying to support them in their activities.
Any more questions, members? No, we're okay. All right, well, thank you for that, Catherine. Thank you, Rob, for joining us today. Really appreciate that. Okay. So, members, next bit on the item on the agenda is to go through the work programme. It's at the back of your documents. Do we just want to mention the items that we're considering for the December meeting?
Yeah, we've got planning issues. There's a report coming on Section 106 legal agreements, and we're looking at some of the underlying policies of the local plan that might be coming forward. We've also got provisional the inward investment strategy, although that might go to January. Do you want to look at January? Yeah, and then January we've got some further planning items in relation to community infrastructure levy and viability guidance, the inward investment strategy, and possibility of something on the digital strategy as well.
Thank you, Sheila. We might obviously just need to look at what we can actually fit into each meeting. And also, we're looking to do a joint meeting, which we've mentioned before, with the health and care social care scrutiny panel on the cycling and walking framework, which would make sense given the public health and the infrastructure matters on that. Just on another point as well, one of the items on our agenda was the relationship with Kirklees neighbourhood housing. Went to an overview scrutiny. I'm sorry, members, I'm getting my words mixed up today. Overview management scrutiny committee. I went there last week, and they have suggested that there's a cross-party councillor subgroup on the relationship with K&H. So unfortunately, what we've seen at this panel now, there will be a subgroup and group business managers will be discussing this with their councillors, and they will nominate councillors from across parties to sit on that group. So that's why, unfortunately, I did try to ask if we could still have it, but that's been decided on. Does that make sense? Am I making any sense here today? John, did you want to come in on that?
It just might be nice for that report to come back through here as part of the process of, sort of governance, so at least we get some sight of it, an opportunity to comment on it maybe.
Okay, John, we'll certainly ask for that. And again, if overview management scrutiny, I'm getting my words mixed up. There you go. That's the right. That's the way right. I'm sorry, members. It's been a busy month for a lot of us, and we've all forgotten how to speak, I think. So we will ask, but they may want to take the lead on it, and if they do, they have priority. Unfortunately, but I'll certainly feed that back in the next meeting as well. So is that all right? Is there any other matters that anyone wants to raise in terms of the work programme, Chris?
When are we scheduled to get some feedback on the waste strategy? Because I think there was some from a previous committee. We're going to get a comeback.
It's not actually programmed in at the moment. I think it's something you are keeping on your monitoring list. Oh, was it the data?
We did have a meeting, Chris.
Do you mean the data that was requested last time? I'll chase that up.
So we did have a meeting on the waste strategy, and they came and spoke about 4 different topics. Yeah. And you're right, we did request some data, so we'll chase that up for you. Is that okay? Yeah. Anything else, members? No? Okay, we have slightly changed the dates for the December and January meeting. The December meeting, just because we're close to the election period, so a number of meetings in December have been changed. I know it's not suitable for everybody because the meeting date has changed to the 20th December. The only reason for that is we need to make sure that the meeting is in public and it's televised, and it's difficult to get into this room. The January meeting's been slightly changed, so we can have a particular update on the planning on the community infrastructure levy. So we're waiting for a response from the inspector, aren't we? Yeah. And that would come in mid-January. So we've just moved the date back so they can come back to us with that. Is that okay, members? Yeah, all right, well, thank you very much. Before we go, I do just want to mention that we're going to be losing Sheila soon. The team have been quite busy, the governance team, so they've been taking on a lot of different committees. So we have got Lee joining us, so we're looking forward to Lee joining us. But I just want to put a record and say thank you to Sheila for all the work she's done for the committee, and I'm sure members would want to pass that on as well. So thank you very much, Sheila. Okay, thank you. Thanks, everybody.